Lots to talk about today, so feel free to ask questions. I've got a lot of things that I would like to bring up because it's been a very, very busy week. Myself, I've been, I think, on about 10 hours, maybe 12 hours of live stream this week, either through the Alliance, through the Alliance constitutional calls, the Alliance arbitration, dispute resolution calls, also with WPS related work, my own personal stuff, EOS Nation related stuff. So it's been really busy in terms of doing some talks. I think it was like 3 days ago, I was on something like 8 hours of talks in a row, pretty much. It's pretty crazy. So very, very, very eventful week. Like I said, lots to talk about, a lot of information. All right, we see that Sam Sticks is in. I'm just gonna move my thing here because I've got Discord open, but I'm gonna make sure I've got my browser open at the same time because I prepared a bunch of links. That way we can talk to it at the same time. Okay, so we've got some people on YouTube participating. Yeah, Sam, we've got Elam. All right, the first thing. What am I going to talk about first? Let's see. What am I going to talk about first? Actually, the one thing that really interests me, and I thought that was interesting. So we did a poll. Elam started a poll. Shout out to Elam, our community manager, social media manager. He's been thinking of innovative ways to reach out to the community because, like we said when we started this journey, it was all about the community. It's all about what you guys and girls want to talk about, what you guys think, what are the hot pressing questions for you, what concerns you have, and what successes you're happy about. And so we want to find ways more and more to reach out to you. And Elam started this poll. I think it was about a week ago or so that started, hey, what's up, David? Elam started this poll, and it was asking, what would you like to talk about, or in which format? So I think it was video or audio, and I think video won, because video killed the radio star. And the question was, what would you like to talk about? And I think the subjects were referendum, WPS, and there was one more thing. There you go, arbitration, ECAF. So, and referendum won 50%. And I think that that's interesting because referendum is, in terms of what it is, it's relatively simple. I mean, it's the tool, it's the most important. So when I say simple, I don't mean that it's not important. It is the most important. And I told that to the founders initially when we started this work, and we were figuring out who would be representing EOS Nation on this working group, or on this, at the time, people just banding together and figuring out how we would go forward with creating a referendum tool. We're talking about almost 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago now. And I said it very bluntly, like, this is the most important thing for EOS. There's nothing more important right now, in my opinion, for EOS, because this is what gives the voice to the community. And it was always meant to be, from the very beginning, part of one of the tools that we would have access to, so that, because we know in this particular chain with DPoS and everything, we're able to affect change. We're able to instill change within the blockchain without having to go and fork. And so we're able to adapt, and we're able to morph, and we're able to, make the chain better with time. And in order to be able to do that, then you need that community feedback. You need that poll, and the referendum system is the way that we would be doing this, so that everybody would have a voice, similar to when you're voting, you have your voice, right? And so the referendum system, very similar. And we didn't have that, and so people banded together. And I said, this is going to be the most important, because everything is going to trickle out from this. Once you have your referendum system, then you can vote on the worker proposals. Then you can vote on whether or not you want them. You can vote on where you would like to go. You could vote on whenever we're going to do systems upgrades, you're going to be able to vote on constitutional articles, because the idea was always the constitution was interim, right? So that referendum system really is the premise and really is the base layer tool that we need in order to be able to go forward. And what I say is interesting with this poll of what the community wants to talk about, and I'll read the question. In an effort to better understand what our community token holders don't fully understand or need more information on, we will be conducting polls to help us decide what content is most valuable to the community. So I find it's interesting that the referendum came out because the referendum tool itself is not very complicated. And the reason why it's taking some time, if we go back to when the chain launched and we didn't have wallets, is a really good example. We had a lot of wallets that started coming out, and one of the tools, or one of the ways, that the way in the very, very beginning was simply to use Node EOS, and that's not very user friendly. But if you have a developer background, then you were able to use Docker to load the chain, and basically to use Node EOS and to interact with the chain at a very, very core base level, no UI, DOS style, just writing your commands in. And we saw that that's not very effective. I mean, most users, first of all, are not comfortable, and they shouldn't be. It's pretty hardcore to be able to do that. You have access to everything, so you could potentially screw up, and it's very easy to potentially make a mistake if you're not comfortable with that. And then we started having more tools. So we started having, for example, the Gray Mass wallet was one of the first ones. And then we had the EOS C, I think is the one. It's the tool from EOS Canada, which made it a little bit easier from Node EOS, but still, if you're not comfortable with DOS and with typing in commands, it's not the best. It's a really good tool. I'm not saying the tool is not great, but from a UI perspective, not very good. And then we got scatter integration. And now we're seeing more wallets pop up, right? So we had our Pomelo wallet that popped up, mobile tool, up until, let's say, the most recent Lynx wallet. And as we go along, more and more tools become friendlier. And why I'm relating that back to the referendum system, referendum tool, is we can't have a referendum tool that comes out and it looks like Node EOS. So this is why it's taking time. It's because we want to make sure, the team wants to make sure that when it's released, it's not the same user experience that we went through with the first wallets in June, where it makes it very difficult for the end user to come in and participate. So you get a very low voter turnout, which doesn't help. It doesn't look great in terms of perception. This tool, when it comes out, it needs to be well thought out of, but it also needs to be well tested. And so not only does it need to look good, it needs to function properly, and it needs to be tested in a wider range of what would I say? Different kinds of, the word's not coming out, situations. So it needs to be situational as well. So there are a lot of technical questions that we're asking. Well, what about this? What about if you've staked your token already? Would you be able to vote as well? So, I mean, design questions, fundamental questions. They've gone to go through different iterations of this, as well as making sure that it looks good. It's got a good user interface when it comes out, right? But again, why does the community want to talk about that? I find it's really, really interesting because we don't have that yet. But once it's out, it's really just that. It's a tool to vote. What I personally find more interesting is, what are we going to be voting on? Once this tool is out, and we have an effective tool. Basically, it's that. It's a tool to be able to vote. What's going to be really interesting, where I thought anyways that people would want to spend more time, is, okay, well, what are we going to be voting on? So if the voting tool itself is simply here, yes or no on particular X question, what are those questions? So for me, the answers are not so interesting. I like the questions, because the questions, I think, are what define where we go, what defines strategy. The questions are really what's interesting to me. I remember seeing, I don't think I'll find it very easily, but if I find that in the future, I'll post it again. But there was a little cool comic talking about questions and answers. Anyways, now I'm veering off. But the question for me, and one of the first questions, and one of the most concrete questions, the Constitution. But another thing that's concrete and that's been already proposed in a way and that you all have access to reviewing is what I thought that people would want to talk about. And so because people did vote for it, well, it's my AMA, and I'm going to talk about it today because I think it's important, and I think it's important to go through. And I'll tell you what I'm doing with it in order to be able to give information to the community. So maybe if Elam, you want to post the budgets open review, the first referendum, the WPS. There you go. What I want to talk about a little bit this morning is this, because you have concrete, this is what's going to be proposed right now. If nobody provides any feedback, if nobody goes and reviews this is what's going to be proposed right now. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to facilitate discussions with the leads of these. So if guys, I'll girls and gals, if you open this link, I'll follow through with you and I'll open it myself. And so it starts off and it says, over the coming weeks, the referendum smart contract system goes into production and is incorporated across voting applications, blah, 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 blah. Here are the budgets that we've received for 4 different emergency, what they consider emergency committee proposals. And this is and they invite the community to go and vet these proposals, to go in them and to figure out what maybe is missing, what could be we worked on, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm interested in doing and what so I reached out to the leads. And what I'll be facilitating within the next week, hopefully, it's not as easy as it sounds. So I got to figure out a format and got to figure out how this is going to work. But what I want to facilitate is going through these proposals and not debating the merits of the proposal itself. So the idea is not to vote yes or no on this proposal at this point. What I'm interested in doing is these are the first proposals that will be going up for vote to the full community. What we should be ensuring is, do they look good? Are they easy to understand? Are they clear? Is there a particular format? Do we want to standardize these so that whenever anybody in the future does a proposal, it looks and it has this type of content in it? Is there information missing? Should we elaborate on some sections? Should we beefen up maybe some sections and add more content in it because it's not as clear? In terms of budget, is that clear enough? Does the community feel ready to vote on something with that level of detail? That's the type of thing that I think I'll be facilitating this week in terms of questions. And then I'm figuring out how I'm going to be doing that with the leads. But I think that these proposals will set the baseline and they'll set the tone for this massive fund that we currently have. So we're not debating whether or not you want the worker proposal fund or not. At this point, we do have it. At this point, these are the rules in place and this is what's going on. So what I'm interested in is the proposals themselves, because Sam asked this the other day, because we've got a channel just for ambassadors and us so that we can, chat, and there's a little bit less messages in there. So it's a little bit more efficient. And he asked about UBI. So Sam, the stage is yours. What do you want to talk about UBI? So I told Sam, if we're going to talk about UBI on this show, you need to give me more content than just, do you want UBI? That's not precise enough. Let's define our terms. If we're going to be debating something, we need to define our terms. So Sam, if you can, I invite you to come audio. You'll be the first person, I think, since we started this AMAs pretty much, to come on this show and let's talk about it. So unmute yourself, come on, and let's talk this through. What do you want to talk about in terms of UBI? And for those who don't know, UBI is Universal Basic Income. So Sam, unmute yourself, come on. Let's talk about UBI. All right, Sam?
All right.
Hey, there you go.
Oh, all right, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity, man.
You're welcome.
All right, so I heard about UBI yesterday, and I was really interested, and I thought to myself, this is going to bring lots of value and attention to EOS as a whole. All right, so I got some friends and we started talking about it and debating on how it's going to bring value to EOS. So generally, I think is a good idea. I think it's good, right?
Can you
But
explain what you think is good, Sam? So when you say UBI, for those listeners, universal basic income, but give
yeah.
context. What's good about it? What are you talking about here?
Okay. Basically, UBI is a way, like you said, is universal basic income. Is a way by which I think a contract or a certain percentage of the inflation on EOS will be distributed to some qualified individuals, right? Basically, we know that artificial intelligence and computers are going to get jobs from a lot of people, right? So UBI is a way in which some of these guys that will lose their job can get, should I use the word compensated? So I think it's a good idea. It's a good idea. But what I don't know is how it's going to be implemented. I don't know how Down intends to implement that, but I think it would draw a lot of attention to EOS as a
Okay,
whole.
well, I've got a question for you, Sam. So you mentioned qualified individuals. Who qualifies these individuals? So why would I be qualified and you would not be qualified? What does that mean? Because if I just go back to the term universal basic income, that
Yeah,
includes everybody.
yeah, everybody.
So who's
Well,
not everybody?
oh, okay. I
Who
think,
would be an unqualified individual?
yeah, that's a very important question. Well, I think since this is going to be done on the blockchain, I think there will be a way for users, right, to have something like a KYC, right, where you can actually state that, hey, my name is Mr. XYZ, my account is XYZ, and I'm real, I'm not a robot. Or we can have one person creating several accounts, so he or she can get benefits from this UBI. So I think there will be something like a KYC, where you can actually identify or prove that you are actually Mr. XYZ. So if you can prove that you're Mr. XYZ or Mrs. XYZ, I think you qualify for the UBI.
And it would be obviously EOS users. Like if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
Mr. or
definitely.
Mrs. XYZ and I don't have a computer, because I mean, the premise is perhaps that I do not have the resources, and that's
Yeah.
why I need help, right? So if I'm
Yes.
somebody that does not have access to a computer, that does not have enough money to be able to have a computer, to have internet, aren't I the person that would benefit from this the most? And so how are you helping me if it's only helping people who already have an EOS account? I'm just
Well,
challenging here. I mean, I
yeah,
just
yeah.
like we talked about. I don't know how this would work. In theory, I'm in concept, the theory, I fully support UBI. How the hell would we implement this to the people that need it the most?
Well, that's a very important question. But currently, I don't know how Dan Larimer is going to fix that. But those who don't have access to internet, those who don't have enough money to even get themselves a mobile phone, it's going to be very challenging for them to get in. But I'm sure there'll be a way. I don't know how, but it's going to be challenging for them initially. But there'll always be a way for them to. I'm sure Dan Larimer is working on something. Uh, but obviously, everybody can't be pleased at the same time. But
When you
that's
say
how
you're
it is right
sure that
now.
Dan is working on something, what makes you so sure that Dan is working on something? And the reason why I ask that is if we look at
Yeah.
previous and current um, landscape, Dan has an
Yes.
idea. He maybe codes the aspect, but how it gets implemented, that's based on the community. So what makes you so sure that Dan is actually working on this and it's not going to be up to the community to figure out how this works?
Well, I know there was a blog post recently. I'm trying to look for the blog post right now. Now, why I'm thinking Dan will work on it is because he has said something about it several times. I think twice, and for him to talk about it twice means he has it in his heart to do something about it. Well, I know it all boils down to the community. The community have to agree on how it's going to be done. But for now, it's just new to a lot of people. It's even still new to me, to trying to comprehend and figure out how that's going to work in my head. But let's see if Dan is going to say more things about it in the future.
So Sam, if you had, and I guess you do because I'm putting you on the spot, if you have like to do an elevator pitch, a 30-second, how you think this, what is this going to do in 30 seconds? What is this going to do? Just say it. Don't think about it. Yeah. What is this going to do?
Well, first of all, it's going to bring value and attention to EOS because there are some young guys out there that some of them I know. They'll be like, hey, this is a way for me to get some freedom, because sometimes money gives you freedom. It's going to bring value to EOS because it's going to bring the attention of the world to EOS, because currently I don't think any other system is doing this, any government or I don't think anyone else is doing this. Well, and this is going to be done on a blockchain. It's going to bring attention to EOS.
Cool. So would you do it because it brings attention to people that are most needed?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
That's what I think. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Sam. I think this is interesting. So I think we're in the very, very beginnings of having this discussion, right? So yes, I'm putting you on the spot and I asked you to come on. I think the idea is if we really want to see this through, it'll require a lot of work. So it's not as simple as saying, let's say, take 1% of the inflation or something like that, and then just give it out. Okay, well, who do you give it out to? How do you give it out? And then just what qualifies, what does not qualify. It just there's so much, and because I haven't thought about this in depth enough, I can't even think of the questions that we would need to ask in order to figure out where do we go next. This is not something that's going to be determined by 2 or 3 posts. This is going to be a lot of work. So people out there, if you're interested in UBI, what I encourage you to do is the same thing that we do in EOS with anything else. Just show up, start a channel, start talking about it, start doing community outreach, and figure out how this would work if it would work. That's how the Referendum channel started. That's how the WPS channel started. Everything in EOS, people can keep saying that EOS is centralized. It's not, nowhere near centralized, because everything happens simply because people show up in channels and they start talking about an idea, and then they just have a common interest that is incredibly decentralized. And yes, then it becomes it's not centralized, the word would not be centralized, but it becomes an organized decentralization group that comes together, but it's not centralized. So Sam, if you think that UBI is really important, and if you want to see this, get people together. Anybody in this channel, get people together, create communities, and start talking about UBI. When you're doing events, Sam, because I know you do a lot of events, talk about UBI. Start talking to the community about it. What do you think? How would this work? How would you see it implemented if you were to see it implemented? Where would the money come from? I think one of the questions, or one of the topics you had broached as well, was potentially having other blockchains participate in this. So if it's 1% of EOS, but it's also 1% of Litecoin and Bitcoin and Ethereum, et cetera, then you could have a huge pot. Well, who's going to talk about that? Who's going to reach out to these other chains? This is monumental in types of work. I mean, obviously, it's universal basic income. The idea is it could potentially affect millions, if not a billion people on this planet, right? So if you think this is interesting, spend the time. This is really good. And I definitely support the idea, the concept, the theory. I just have no idea how we would implement this.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll be launching I'll be talking about it on the 22nd of September. That's when we'll be launching the hub in Nigeria. So I'll definitely be talking about it. Yeah, there'll be a talk show where I will invite. I'm talking to some lecturers in University of Port Harcourt and some other universities in Nigeria here. Bring them for the launch of the blockchain hub, the EOS Nation hub. Yeah, it will be the blockchain, the EOS Nation launch hub stroke meetup. So in the meetup and the launch, there's going to be a talk show where obviously we'll talk about blockchain in general and the impact of blockchain and how it benefits Nigeria as a whole. And also we'll talk about UBI and how it's how the importance of UBI, what you think about UBI and how we can move forward from there.
And Sam, while you're on talking about chain that that EOS Nation is sponsoring, but that you're launching, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. All right. So for some weeks right now, I've been working on the hub. Initially, it was supposed to be just one hub, and then I got another call, and someone offered me another space for another hub. But for now, I'm just working on one of the hubs right now, and we've done all the finishing, we fixed the AC, the fans, the designs. We have the EOS Nation Hub banner in the hub already, and we'll be launching the hub in 2 weeks' time on the 22nd of September, right? So the purpose
it's
for
a
this
beautiful
hub,
date.
yeah. The purpose of this hub is to bring knowledge of EOS to Nigeria and possibly Africa. I don't know if even in the future we're going to have more hubs, maybe like 2 or 3 hubs in the whole of Nigeria. But for now, this is the first and could end up being the only one. But for now, we just have just one hub. So this would be like a collaboration space and a learning center where people come to learn about blockchain, where we'll be having meetups, where we'll be having hackathons and maybe meetings. And also we're working at on creating or starting a university club, EOS Nation University Club. Now, the purpose for this club is to get computer science students and computer engineering students from different universities and then bring them to this hub and teach them about EOS, about cryptocurrency, about blockchain, about EOS, and how they can build and deploy their ideas on this enterprise blockchain. So that's the purpose of the hub. And the hub is actually close to University of Port Harcourt. University of Port Harcourt is one of the most popular universities in Nigeria here. So it's about 5 minutes drive to the university. So I think it's a good and perfect location so we can get the students and get lecturers, because the university is a learning center and the hub also is a learning center. So that's basically what we're working on.
That's awesome, Sam. That's a really, really good explanation on what you're doing down there. Small changes one day at a time to be able to bring value to your community. So for those who don't know, like Sam was one of our first ambassadors. He was, I believe, our second ambassador from Nigeria. You started, when was it, Sam? Do you remember? Maybe in April or May?
Yes, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and Sam's been doing really, really great work. Sam was one of the original people who started, I believe it was the first EOS meetup in Lagos, right? Maybe the first EOS meetup in Nigeria?
In Nigeria as a whole. I think in Africa. Africa.
I'm not sure about Africa, because, I mean, there's EOS Nairobi as well, so maybe Kosi did some stuff. I don't know.
I'm sure I did a meetup 3 to 4 months before EOS mainnet was launched.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first EOS.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So Sam's been doing some great work down there, and so he approached us with this hub idea, and EOS Nation is glad and humbled, very, very lucky to be able to help out with that, because there's a lot of good work going on. And we always said at EOS Nation that one of our goals when we started this was to be able to bring blockchain to the whole world, not just communities that have a lot of funding and or developed countries, or what we would see as the countries right now that are a little bit more fortunate. But one of the key goals was to bring a lot to the unbanked and to the people that will be able to benefit the most from this. And so we deployed a significant amount of resources and time in Nigeria for example, and in particular. And so we've got 4 ambassadors down there, and they've been doing some tremendous, amazing work. So Sam is one of them. So big shout out to Sam. And thank you, Sam, for coming on and talking about UBI, talking about the hub. That's very, very nice of you. I know putting you on the spot a couple of times, and it's live, so it's might be nerve-wracking, but you did a really good job. And please keep doing the good work. I mean, you guys are doing some amazing work.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm really grateful.
All right. So I'll go back to the event that I was talking about. The one thing that I wanted to talk about, I had a call. It was yesterday, I believe, maybe yesterday morning. I think it was yesterday morning. I had a call with the arbitration, the Alliance arbitration / dispute resolution group, and I really want to talk about this. If you haven't had a chance to go and look at the call, I'll post the link here. I'll post it because I think the one I gave to Elim earlier, that link that you just posted, I think might start at like 10 minutes or something like that. I'm not too sure, but anyways, go check that link that Elim just posted. This is a really good call. So Colin Rule, former VP of dispute resolution at eBay, PayPal. He's an online dispute resolution expert. There are not many like him in the world. He's been in this space for, I believe, 25 years. He's really toughed it out, and he really pushed this field when, and this is new in a sense that he's had to go against traditional thinkings of how you would do dispute resolution, and especially in an online world, from a legal perspective, cross-jurisdictional perspective, more so is where the challenges lie, right? So if I'm buying something from you, of recourse. And so this particular video, Colin explains it very, very, very well where he comes from, and I think he debunks a lot of the myths I think that we've heard of against dispute resolution. I think he also goes into detail specifically. For example, if we're going to talk about scalability, eBay when he left was processing roughly, might be wrong on these numbers, but roughly 60 million dispute resolutions per year. So if you want somebody who's going to tell you, well, this is not scalable, I don't know, like if you can process 60 million per year, pretty sure you've achieved the level of, yes, I am scalable, I can scale. If not, I have no idea what your baselines are. But 60 million seems pretty high in terms of what they're able to achieve and how they're able to achieve that. And he goes through the full process, right? So when we talk about dispute resolution, everybody is focusing on the last level, which is arbitration. But arbitration is simply a form of dispute resolution. It's one of the ways that you can resolve a dispute. At first, for example, at eBay, you go through their dispute resolution center, and it kind of looks like a FAQ in the beginning, an FAQ. You go in and, okay, click here, and it gives you ideas and stuff. And then the first part, in his 4-part plan that they've installed at eBay, for example, is a diagnostic process. So you yourself as a user, you've got an issue, something happened. Well, you would go and you'd click around, and then in 50% of the 60 million cases at eBay, 50% of them are resolved by the user themselves. The user themselves goes through a diagnostic process and is able to fix the problem. The dispute, whatever it may be, it's a problem, it's a frustration. They're able to fix that frustration themselves, 50 million of them. That's dispute resolution. That's part of it. The second phase, for example, if it's a contract between 2 people, then the 2 people get together and they're assisted by an algorithm. So again, there's no arbitrator here. There's no human layer here other than the parties themselves. If you go to that second layer, 90% of the 60 million get resolved at that. So up to 90%. So as in like 50% gets resolved at the first level. So when you go up to the second level, then 90% of all those disputes, so of the 60 million, are now resolved just at the second level. And the second level, again, there's no human intervention. It's just the two parties together, and oftentimes it's misunderstandings. You and I did business, we have a misunderstanding, and now that misunderstanding is cleared. Both of us agree, we're both happy now, everybody's good. That frustration is removed. 90%. Still no human intervention. That's still dispute resolution. We're still not anywhere near arbitration at this point. Third level, mediation. We get a third party to come in and just listen to both parties. Just listen to both parties. And maybe I'm speaking English, you're speaking English, but we're clearly not speaking the same language. And all we need was a third party that's completely neutral, that has no power, no arbitration power, so that is not going to award or say you're right, you're wrong type of deal at all. Basically just going to talk with the two parties, and then most of the disputes get resolved at that level. Now you're talking about like 99%. So 99% of all the disputes are now being resolved. And there's still nobody that feels like they've been harmed or anything. Like everybody's happy. That's the whole point. By then, that frustration is removed. Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, yeah, that's what. Okay, well, how about we do this? Oh, you're cool if we do this? Yeah. Okay, so both parties are in agreement. Good. And the mediator did not tell them what to do. He just facilitated the discussion. That's it. That last level, in their case, is evaluation. In our case right now would be the arbitration level. That's when a judgment would be rendered. So it's similar to a court kind of deal. So it's somebody that comes in, typically not the mediator, because the mediator would perhaps have heard some information that the people, if they knew they were going to arbitration in front of a judge type of deal, they would not have shared. And so this arbitrator comes in, listens to both stories, and then because both parties have not been able to come up with a solution that both of them agree on, then you get the last final stage. But all of this is a dispute resolution process. Interesting facts about it. In a healthy marketplace, Colin was saying that in a healthy marketplace, in terms of volume, 1 to 3% of all transactions result in dispute. Most of them are misunderstandings. And the more effective that you can deal with these disputes, the more effective and the more trust you create in your community. And the more trust you create in your community, the more people want to use your platform and they want to use your services, because they know that in most cases, yeah, there might be issues. We're not going to, kid ourselves. People doing business, at some point, there's going to be issues. It's just a matter of time. But if when those issues occur, there's a clean process in place, there's clear policies in place, and there's a clear system in place that will be there and be in place to be able to remove those frustrations in a quick and efficient manner. And by quick and efficient, he also talked about other stats. They noticed that for frustrations or disputes that lasted longer than 12 days for low value. So we're not talking about like I lost $450 million here. For low value, which most transactions will be low value in general, right? So it's me and you transacting. Maybe it's me playing the EOS dice game and I bet $5. Or maybe it's $1, whatever, or it's $6.50 now, I think the minimum, something like that. So it's for low transactions. If that dispute lasts longer than 12 days, even if I win, I will be more frustrated than if I lost that case on day one. So I played my 650. I feel like I've been wronged. I claim a dispute. I claim that there's a case. If that case takes longer than 12 days to get resolved, even if I win and I get my 650 back or whatever it may be in this example, I'll be more frustrated than if I just lost that 650 and I lost my case on day one. So the amount of time that it takes to resolve disputes for low value is incredibly important. And so not only does this system need to be scalable, it needs to be quick. And how is it quick? It's quick because most disputes are resolved by the user themselves and or by assisted algorithms and or by mediation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have all this in place to be able to resolve this dispute quickly. And then he talks about the trust tool, and he talks about the 3 levels of trust that you need to create in your platform in order to be able to really create that trusted environment. You've got that number 1, which is the feedback reputation. So you need a system that can report bad transactions. So if I feel like I've been wronged, I need to have a means to be able to voice that. So a feedback loop, a reputational loop. So if we go look at eBay, you got the seller rating, that type of thing, right? So that needs to be there. And then you got a resolution portion, which I just mentioned, which is a fast, fair resolution. Every time there's a dispute, 100% of the time, it can't be 50% of the time, 100% of the time, there needs to be a fair resolution to each dispute. Now, the process itself, the whole system itself needs to be fair. In your particular case, you might feel like you've been wronged, but the whole system needs to be fair. And if the whole system is fair, everybody wins, and that creates trust. Then he was giving an example of, for example, a seller that's got 100% seller rating, positive seller rating. Let's say they've transacted 10,000 times, 100,000 times, and then they get into this dispute and they lose that dispute. Now they lose their 100%. They're at 99.999% because they've transacted 10,000 times. This was the 10,000th time or something like that. And now they feel like man, this sucks. I've always done good. You can see it by my stats. I'm a good seller. I'm a good platform. I never screw up. Everything is great. And the people might be upset. But what he's saying is, go look back at the stats. The fact that we have a system in place that's fair, you might not agree with this particular judgment, but look at in general, this system works really well. You might not be in agreement with this particular case, but the policy and the system in place is really good, that it creates trust. And the fact that you've got, let's say, 9,999, and that people respect that, and that it's worth something, that has meaning, that's where the value is at, and that's where the trust is built. So that's number two. And the third one is fraud. So you also need a system in place where when there's clear fraud, you need to be able to cut out those bad actors, straight up remove them from the system. You need to have a system in place for that. So I invite you to watch the video. I just gave you a very, very high level breakdown of what's talked about. It's an hour. It was amazing to participate. Colin is amazing. We had Steven that was there as well, and that was asking questions, great questions. Steven, we had Amy that was asking great questions. I've been spending a couple of calls this week with Amy because she's been leading the facilitating portion of the Alliance working group on dispute resolution, and she had some great questions there as well. So I invite you to go watch that video that Elam just posted. We're gonna get there, guys and gals. Like, this is needed. Go listen to that video. You'll understand more why we need this at the base level. People are confounding, and we've lost that meaning. This has been my focus this week, and just talking about that particular portion. The original intent of this blockchain to be able to be the enterprise blockchain of choice for small businesses, to be able to have mainstream adoptability, to have multiple transactions on chain, to be able to take advantage of and use the fact that this blockchain is incredibly fast. We need that medium of recourse, and we need that transactional confidence, that transactional certainty. Go listen to that video. Really, really good. We're going to get there. It's going to happen. People will realize that this is incredibly important, and that dispute resolution does not mean arbitration. That is one of the forms. Sure, that is the last form. That's kind of the last resort. A lot of the disputes can be resolved internally by yourself, and then perhaps with the other person, but this need to be at the base level. This system in place needs to be at the base level. So go listen to that video. It'll give you a lot of insight. Nova Crypto, maybe a basic question about referendum system. When a new proposal is done and voted on an existing article of the Constitution, is the new Constitution generate a new hash in the EOS blockchain? I think what you're asking is, if we review a constitutional article and then that constitutional article is presented up for referendum, and then that referendum passes, so you get all the parameters, right? So the 15% of voter participation, and then you get for 30 consecutive days, 10% more yeses than nos. What happens then? Well, then the block producers would have to put in that. Actually, it's not even on the chain. We would just simply approve that new link to that new constitutional repository, and that would become the new constitution. It would be approved from there. Now, if that constitution changes reg producer, if it changes any of those contracts, then yes, those contracts would need to be updated. But the Constitution itself right now is simply being pointed to. So you would go modify the document that's being pointed to. That's how it's currently done. And it would have to be, the 15 out of the 21 that would vote for this. So that's kind of more of a procedural question. But in EOS block, there is hash linked to the Constitution, right? So there is a link to the current Constitution, sure, but the current Constitution is not written. It's linked to the repo, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me on that, but I think it is simply pointed to, and so you would go change where it is pointing to. And then that's how you would do that part. Any other follow-up questions on that? If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed to, what am I going to do? We've got about 7 minutes left, top of the hour. Going to talk about next week. Next week, there's an event in Toronto. So Elam, if you want to post that link, EOS Projects and Update, it's a meetup in Toronto. And I will be speaking there. So I will be a guest speaker at this event in Toronto. If you don't have the link, Elam, I'm just going to post it. It'll be faster. There you go, because I have it up. I'll be speaking there. And I've also invited Ross, the CEO of Huobi Canada. So Huobi Canada just opened offices in Canada. And one of our founders, Daniel, doing some great work on the referendum. He met with Ross about 2 weeks ago. I've been speaking with Ross for a while now, since he came on. And I'm going to go down to Toronto next Wednesday, September 12th, spend the day with him, talk about collaboration with Huobi in Canada. And then we're going to be doing a crypto event at nighttime, an EOS project event. So doing that next Tuesday. So if you're in the Toronto area, I invite you to come over. It's a free event, Wednesday, 12th of September, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And then if we go back to the questions, what else do we have? So now the Constitution is interim Constitution. Yes, it's interim, but I don't even really want to call it interim Constitution. It is the Constitution. Interim in the sense, they'll always all be interim in the sense that, are they going to ever be updated? Like, is this the final version? I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's ever going to be final in that sense, because why wouldn't we, if we could, want to improve on it? I'm not saying that there's not going to. So right now what's different, and where maybe I would coin the term interim for sure, is that there's an active community going up for a rewrite of this Constitution. And maybe in the future, we won't have that active as much, in the sense that, okay, we're good with this Constitution. Doesn't mean we can't update it. Doesn't mean that some articles won't be reworded. Doesn't mean like all that stuff. But then it will be very different. So in that sense, sure, it is interim. But it is currently a Constitution. So it is in place. It is in effect. It is enforceable. It is the Constitution. Hackathon in London, when is it? So I'm also going down to London, or going up to London. Yeah, I'm not sure what you would say there. September 22nd to 27th is when I'll be in London. The hackathon itself is September 22nd, September 23rd in London, near the Imperial College of London at the Science Museum. So I'm going to be there. I've never been to London, so it'll be really interesting to see the taxis and the hotels of London, because pretty much that's what you do when you travel for business. You're basically going from taxi to business location, back to taxi, back to your hotel room, back to taxi, back to the business location. But it'll be interesting. I'll see how taxis look like. No, I won't even see taxis, because we got a place near the event, and so I'll be walking. So I will see the outdoors. So that is the hackathon in London. So for those of you who can make it, 22nd, 23rd, hackathon in London, and then Blockchain Live on the 26th of September. And then, yes, Nova Crypto is talking about their meetup in Switzerland on October 4th in Lausanne, for those of you who are there. So October 4th in Lausanne, so we've got our in-house ambassadors that are going to be there, prospect ambassador and ambassadors. We've got Patrick and we've got Thierry, and then we have our founder, one of our co-founders, Vincent, who's going to be going, is going to be spending some time in France and in Switzerland while he's there. Now go back to Elim. I think I saw a question. So from RFGDGD 2, any word on when WPS is coming out? Not sure what you're asking there. Any word on when WPS is coming out? I imagine that what you're trying to ask is, when would we see potentially funds being released for WPS projects? And that I can't answer. I don't know. I talked about it if you were there in the very beginning. I talked about the first proposals that have been put public. And those are public. So when the referendum tool's out, at some point you'd be able to vote on the WPS proposals in place. Let's say in a really, really good world, it is possible that WPS funds, if everything goes well, and by well, I shouldn't say well. That's not what I mean. If everything, if the proposals that are put in place are voted on positively in the shortest amount of time possible for the parameters set to be able to vote on a proposal, we could potentially see funds being released, let's say this winter. I hope that was precise enough to answer your questions. Another question from RFGDGD. Rumor has it. Okay, no, I thought you added rumor. You didn't put a space there. Rumor has it that BP will blacklist the non-listing BPs who are just sucking resources. Is that true? What do you mean by that? So there are BPs that are sucking resources. Do you mean getting paid, like voter rewards? BPs will blacklist the BPs that are sucking resources. So I'm guessing what you're talking about is like, there's a rumor, I guess, what you're saying, that block producers that are getting block producer rewards, but I'm just sucking resources, I guess, not contributing back to the community, or aren't as transparent, is what Elim's saying. Okay, that well, so I guess we'll go back. You can't just, first of all, let's say we were to blacklist somebody, they could just unreg. I mean, they'd be kicked out. They could just reg produce with another account name. So sure, that might work, but it's not a long-term solution. But regardless, if we go back to, could we kick them out? What would you be kicking them out on? You'd have to kick them out based on the current rules that are in place. Like the BPs who are voted by whales but aren't doing anything. Well, right now, there's no rule in place that says you need to do something. Well, yes, there are. Sorry, that's not true. There are rules in place that do say, and these are the reg producer rules. Maybe Elim, you can link to reg producer. You need to do certain things. For example, you need to maintain a website. I made a video about this. So you need to maintain a website. You need to have API endpoints, API or P2P endpoints, and you need to, for example, disclose any ownership larger than 10%. Now, the disclose ownership by 10%, if you don't disclose your ownership, it doesn't mean that you have people over 10%, so you can't really do anything with that. API, P2P endpoints, sure, that's fairly easy, so that's a pretty low standard. And then having a website, that's also a really, really low standard, right? So I can't just kick you out because I think you're ugly. I can't kick you out because I've never seen you talk in the channels. I can't kick you out because your website points to a shitty website. Like, those are not things that I can do. So if I invite you to go watch this video that Elim just posted. So if you're talking about a rumor of kicking out people, I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, even if they were to be blacklisted, they could simply re-reg produce with a different name. This is a larger conversation than this. And yes, there is a group, a BP compliance group, that is working on actively getting people to be compliant. And I think that the focus should be that. It shouldn't be to punish people, because right now, unless we're going to redefine and rewrite the reg producer, there's very little that you can punish people on. I think the idea and where we should be spending our time is on creating value for the ecosystem, on encouraging those people to create value for this ecosystem, on reaching out to them, on finding out what it is they're doing. Now, if all else fails, then yes, we do need to have a system in place so that people don't just, and I quote, suck resources. Fair enough, for sure. But how to do that is not as simple as that. So I invite you to partake in those discussions on Telegram. There are groups that and just go check in governance and go check in the DP compliance group. So that type of thing. I invite you to participate in this. But it's really not just, hey, I think you don't participate. And I'll give you a good example. I saw not too long ago a group that did a list of, if we were to what was the word they use? Notion of determining what a BP should be doing. So that's another question, what they should or should not be doing. The clear consensus, and even this is mentioned by Dan, this is what we talked about from the very beginning. Your job as a block producer is to produce blocks. Our job is to have solid infrastructure. So because we're a standby block producer, our job is to have infrastructure that's ready in case we do get pulled up to the big leagues, type of deal. That's really our job. Creating value for the community, hosting up, holding these AMAs, that's all bonus. That's actually not the job of a block producer, although I don't agree, and I think that the block producers should be adding value to the community. Personally, that's why I'm doing it. But there's nowhere it says that you have to do that. Right? So this person made a list, pretty cool, but there was a clear divide. Like the top block producers in that reordered list were all English-speaking block producers. And all the block producers in the bottom list were all Chinese block producers or Korean block producers. Clearly not fair. Because what that person did is they checked at, and it really good intent, really good. But then a lot of the information is not in English. So just because the information is not easily accessible for English-speaking people, and by the way, English is not my first language, so I understand where this is coming from. We're using English because it is kind of the common business universal language, but it does not mean, for me, I'm French, I grew up in Ottawa, English was fairly easy to learn. It's accessible. If you're going to certain places, it's not as accessible. So it's not as easy as, why don't you just English? Why don't you have all your website in English? Why don't you do a daily newsletter in English? Well, not as simple as that for some people. So I think we need to be a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more understanding that just because English comes easy to you or to me, it does not for everybody. And so this list, it was clear that the information that was gathered in English, that this person did try to reach out in English in channels for those Chinese block producers. But prime example, Start EOS. Start EOS does an article every single day. I'm not kidding. It's one article every single day. So this particular block producer, Start EOS, has a hardware wallet. They have a mobile wallet. They do an article every single day. They do tons of educational content, and that they were ranked one of the lowest in terms of community outreach. They reach out to their large community in China every single day, all the time, tons of tools that they've built, not only software tools, but hardware tools. They're there, they're in the trenches, they're doing work. But because it's not being seen out in the West, they get a low ranking for that. So we have to be very careful, going back to RFG, DGDs, RFG, DGGs question. We have to be very careful of sucking resources. Just because we can't see them doing work does not mean that they're not doing work. I'm not excusing them. I'm sure there's some people that are sucking resources, and let's find ways to remedy that for sure. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes we need to do a little bit more work to go and find that out. And it's not easy, sure. And we at EOS Nation in particular have been spending a lot of time trying to bridge that gap. So I spent, I believe it's 52 days in the last 3 months in China, trying to build the bridges between both communities so that we don't veer away like what we've seen happen in other blockchain communities. Other blockchain communities, there's a clear divide between East and West, and I do not want to see this happen with EOS. I think that a global community is possible, and I want to do my part, and EOS Nation wants to do their part to be able to really strengthen those bonds between both communities, because it's not as simple, because it's not easy, but it is incredibly important. If we want to see this succeed, one of the greatest assets that EOS has is its community. Let's not divide it. Let's do what we can to strengthen it. And yeah, there are barriers, there are language barriers, there are cultural barriers. Let's do what we can to reduce and remove those barriers and increase those bonds and increase the strength of these links between both cultures and between the languages and between people from all around the planet. And that's what we aim to do with our ambassador program. For example, we've got ambassadors throughout the world, and we try to get the pulse from people who come from northern hemisphere countries, southern hemisphere countries, east, west, all around the world. We try to get some people and get some feedback from various communities, various languages, so that we have a good sense of, as a global community, what are your thoughts? What are your concerns and your successes? So I think that that's really important. I kind of went on a rant there. I hope that that answered your question. I hope that you guys learned something from this. I'll just read the last thing here because we're going over, but there was a lot that happened this week. So it was long AMA, a lot of content. Nova Crypto says, which period will be able to vote referendum via referendum smart contract via tab? Which period? We will be able to vote for referendum via referendum smart contract via toolkits such as EOS toolkit. What is your thought? What do you mean by which period? Like, you mean timeline? When would be able to vote for referendum? I don't know when. It should be coming relatively soon. People have been saying this. Daniel the other day, month, I don't know. Maybe this month, maybe next month. I don't think we're talking about a lot of time remaining. Their final touches to the UI being done, maybe we can find what Daniel said. Hold on a second. Let me try and go find that for you. Just hold on a second. If we go to, trying to find where he would have posted that. And I'll try to find. Trying to find that. So Daniel said the tally is done. Smart contracts have been for some time. Some people are wrapping up the work for UI and the Scatterworks, and so Scatterworks and Voting Works. The remaining to do is success fail notifications, markup formatter, sorting, and filtering. The estimate is that the UI will be done by this weekend. In the meantime, some people are wrapping up some work on the documentation, and then they'll get started on heavy end-to-end testing. So I would say that heavy end-to-end testing will be starting next week. So after that, how long? I don't know. Maybe a good week or two of heavy testing. I know that some testing has already occurred, but and then going from there, I think your question is pretty pointed in terms of, would you be able to vote via the toolkit such as EOS toolkit? That I'm not sure. I think the package that's being worked on right now would be an end-to-end package, so you'd be able to vote with it directly at the same time. I think it would be. I think the idea is that it will be compatible with other tools. So I hope that answers your questions. And thank you very much, Elam, for pointing to that. But I'm not stressed. Middle October, no, end of October. Yeah, potential. I really don't know. Potentially. That we'd have to, like, I remember when I went to China for the second tour, before I left for China, I left at the end of July, and the idea was that we would have something to present to the community August 1st. And that was a month ago, and we still don't have something. But then they added functionalities, and I think what they're working on is really valuable. And so taking that time to make sure that when it comes out, like I said at the very beginning of the show, when it comes out, it's easy to use, it's good, and we don't have to worry about, oh my God, I'm not comfortable using this tool, because we do need that voter participation. So with that, I'm going to end. This has been a really long AMA today. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your participation. I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope that you'll tune in next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. All right. Peace out.